Okay, we are joined by Max Goodman, joining us from the Dunedin Media Room, where the Yankees and Blue Jays are going to be playing a game this afternoon. And Max, some breaking news this morning as you were driving over. I guess breaking news on Aaron Judge. We'll start with the Judge stuff because 20 minutes ago, Scott and I recorded something for the rest of the show, and we talked about how we are worried about Cole, but we're not worried about Aaron Judge. This is probably just some spring fatigue. He's going to sit for a few days and he'll be back better than ever. Well, we got some more news that the MRI was on his he had an MRI on his abs. Tests are clean, which is good. He won't swing a bat this week, and his goal, in his own words, is to play on opening day, but he doesn't feel the need to push it right now, and said the soreness could be connected to extensive winter batting practice. Max, do you have any other information? I'm sure you don't, but what are your thoughts there?
I don't. Yeah. Last night I wrote a story kind of, summarizing the last 48 hours in terms of what's been going on with Judge, and it traces all the way back to when he only took 2 at-bats on Sunday, came out of the game, and, Soto hit that big home run. Judge should have been on deck, but it was Trent Grisham. And, we checked in with him. We checked in with Boone after the game, and that was the scheduled plan, but they made it sound like it was just, hey, we want to split time with Grisham here, and it's only March 10th. You're not going to, not be ready for opening day if you don't take an extra at bat here. But then it was another red flag the next day when Judge wasn't out there for batting practice and he didn't play in the split squad. So now we know that there was a little more going on there. And Boone said in Clearwater yesterday, Monday, that Judge was dealing with some mid-spring soreness that he was feeling, quote, beat up, and that it was probably a product of the workload. So, your mind can go to different places. You give him the benefit of the doubt and think that he is going to be ready for opening day, but for him to slam on the brakes, as it were, here when, it's only just over 2 weeks until opening day, I don't think it's time to panic for the Yankees just yet. But anytime you send someone for imaging, and we'll talk about Garrett Cole as well, it's not 100% not a concern, right? I mean, you want to go get something checked out, give him a couple of days of rest, and you never know what can happen. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on now in these next couple of days.
Anything with Judge and that core midsection area that clearly affects baseball players when you have to swing a bat. It's a pretty intensive part of your body for doing the thing that you need to do at a high level is a concern. And the fact that they needed to get it, and maybe this is anything with a guy like Judge, anything with a guy like Cole, you get images just to know. And, we were talking about Cole a little bit about like, he's very in tune with everything that goes on with his body, his mechanics, all the things. So like, maybe that was just more information for him. Who knows? That's kind of what I'm hoping for. But with Judge in the midsection, that's definitely something. And, he hasn't taken a lot of at-bats in the spring. Not that anybody's looking for results in spring training for Aaron Judge, because it doesn't matter. But when you start thinking about, what the at-bats have been like, and now you're looking at, some of the smoke that we're starting to see, questions are definitely starting to linger into the back of the head. I really do hope that this is just some fatigue, hitting during the winter a little bit more than usual. And his body just needs to kind of reboot to get ready for spring training. But yeah, man, like this is one of those things. Those two names are not ones you want to hear with the word or initials MRI involved.
Right. And something that I can add is yesterday in the press box, Brian Hoke pulled up the replays of the 2 at-bats that Judge took, and he didn't look like himself. I mean, as you said, these results really don't matter, and maybe he was working on something, but there were some swings that, he wasn't facing Spencer Strider. I don't even remember who he was facing from the Braves in that game. And something that just occurred to me now is I think that Harrison Bader in spring training swung and missed at a pitch and then had an oblique injury. And you could kind of tell in that moment that something might have been up. And there was a replay that kind of circulated on Twitter. I don't remember the user's name. I'd shout him out, but he clipped it, and it was a swing and miss from Judge in his second at bat. And he kind of made like, you could argue that it looked like a wince. Maybe it was just him saying, oh man, I missed that pitch. But I mean, these are all, it builds up the smoke around this, and you're thinking maybe this is something bigger than just, giving a guy who's been working out a lot a couple of days. And again, these two players are, to say the least, indispensable, right? I mean, this is the worst case scenario if they're going to miss time. I don't think we can go to that point just yet because there is a little bit of time, and we don't know what the MRI for Cole says just yet. And it seems like Judge is planning to be ready for opening day. But the biggest concern that I have reacting to this is the Yankees expect the Yankees expect Judge to be the everyday center fielder. And if he's already feeling like this after 30 innings in the field and 14 at bats, that's a little bit I'll use the phrase again, a red flag that, is he going to be able to play out there every single day? And that wasn't necessarily the plan. He was going to DH. They have Trent Grisham. He's going to play in center field a lot too. But that's going to start to make it harder for the Yankees to organize that lineup because Soto needs to play right for defensive deficiency purposes. And then what are you going to do with Stanton? If one of those two is at DH, there's a trickle down effect if Judge isn't able to play center field as much. That's what they have to do as of now with the way that the roster is constructed.
And Judge did have an oblique back in 2019. He missed a bunch of time. I just looked up. There was a headline from April 20th about his oblique injury. So this is not like an injury that he's never. And also, we're speculating this might be an oblique thing. He's had midsection core muscle injuries. I'm with you guys. Like this could be a couple week thing, and then he's back and he's fine, and it's like it's never happened. But yeah, I think the lack of time that he's actually had in spring training, coupled with the weird situation on Sunday, like you described, Max, like makes you raise an eyebrow also because of how injuries have gone, like the track record with this team, the Yankees, and how they've mishandled injuries and the fuzziness of their communication on injury timetables and like how things are actually happening. You'd have to be, I mean, anyone is going to be skeptical about the information that they're telling us. That's sort of natural. And it's your job, Max, and your colleague's job to sort of dig into that, to try and find out what's really going on here.
Right. Sometimes you do need to read the tea leaves and kind of just get a sense of what's going on. But you have to also take what the team gives you for face value and react to that, of course, as well. But I think that when you get definitive results on these MRIs, like that's when we can really react to what's going on with Cole. And if Judge doesn't play Wednesday tomorrow, but he also doesn't play for a few more days after that, then you start to think that maybe this is more serious. So for right now, you give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that Judge has kind of silenced a lot of the injury concerns these last couple of years. Yep. And, I talked about the center field stuff. Let's preface that he played center field a lot in 2022, and he played in 157 games or whatever it was. So he has kind of distanced himself from those years where he was injured so much. And last year it was a fluke that he ran into the concrete slab in an antiquated stadium. So,
for a team that spends $1 billion on their players. Yeah.
Right.
Now that they deferred all that money, they can have some money for some extra padding. Well, you said if Judge doesn't play on what he's not going to play. He already said I'm not swinging a bat for the rest of the week. So we already know he's not playing the rest of this week.
Right. So, at a certain point, he does need to get himself ready. You can train all winter, and that was kind of a narrative the first couple of weeks at camp, is that so many Yankees came to Tampa early and the morale was higher. Everyone was motivated after the way last season went. But those last couple of weeks of spring training games, as much as the results don't matter, they're very important for every single player because the starters are going to start to play deeper into the game, 6-7 innings in the field, 3, 4, 5 at bats by the end. And if Judge is missing out on that time, he's one of the best hitters on the planet. I think he'll be fine as long as he's healthy. But, it's something to keep an eye on, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. All right, so you mentioned Garrett Cole. Sounds like we're going to get test results back Wednesday or maybe later this week. Anytime there's an elbow MRI for your star pitcher, that's obviously concerning. And I had said to Scott earlier, it's like the three of us have talked about how their concerns in this injury were injury related, and we never even brought up Garrett Cole. And now Garrett Cole has the injury concern, and that just sort of makes this even more potentially devastating. Is if the guy you were relying on to make 32 starts, and it wasn't even a question in any of our minds, like, yeah, he's just going to make 32 starts, is potentially out for significant time, then the rest of this rotation looks really shaky.
Absolutely. And again, we're recording this on Tuesday, so by the time you see this out there, the conversation we're having might be outdated, but it is a concern, right? Because when someone does go for an MRI on their elbow, even if it's precautionary, there's clearly something going on there. And like you said, every conversation, you and I this offseason leading into spring training, but everybody else, when you look at that rotation, it was, you've got Cole, he's the ace, he's coming off a Cy Young Award, he's going to be great again this year. And the concerns were the next four guys. And is Clark Schmidt going to take a step forward? Can the other three guys stay healthy and stay efficient and effective every 5 days? No one was ever considering that with Cole because he's been so durable and consistent throughout his career. So, he hasn't been recovering from his starts. He is feeling some discomfort in there, and the vibe that I got from talking to some of the other players in the clubhouse, as much as they were finding out on MLB Network, like it was fresh in that moment on the TVs in there, that they were saying hopefully it's him trying to get ahead of something, that it's precautionary, that he just wanted to be safe. But again, anytime that there's something involving the elbow, especially with a pitcher that has been so healthy throughout his career and is so cognizant of taking care of his body and his biggest weapon, which is that part of his body, it's a concern. But it may end up being nothing, and it may end up being something where he misses time. We just don't know yet.
What are the conversations between you guys? Because if you look at what his spring training has been, it's been very different. It's been odd because, he got pulled after his first start, then he came back in. So there was something there. Then all of a sudden the next game is not out in a spring training game in front of everybody. It's a sim game behind closed doors. And I went back and was looking at the, him talking to the media, and just, there's little tells that you're looking at of him almost like with an uncertain tone in his voice. But yeah, it's just speaking of smoke, like there's definitely smoke with him given the way that he's rolled out in spring training. It's been very abnormal to see a guy like him start spring the way that he has. And now all of a sudden he's getting imaging, because I feel like this is something that has been, trying since that first start. And was he having problems bouncing back from that first start also into the sim game, or did we just learn about that after the sim game for this most recent?
That wasn't completely specified in terms of when exactly the recovering process was bothering him. But yeah, I mean, these guys want to be facing other teams. They want to be playing in an in-game environment. So for them to keep him in a controlled environment behind closed doors, like you said, I don't remember seeing anything watching him throw that live session that would have screamed, he's not 100%. And I talked to him the other day about, a bigger picture story that I'm working on about the World Series leadership in that clubhouse, guys who have been there before. And he's one of them. It's not a long list. And he was Garrett Cole. There were no tells that something was going on. But again, he is such a creature of habit in terms of building up and being so hypersensitive to pitch count and getting those reps in. And so, I remember, I think it was Jack Curry that asked Cole after his live session, or maybe it was Boone, what's the plan now? He's only thrown 50 some odd pitches and he has 3 starts left to go until opening day. Is he going to throw 15, 15, and 15 to get to closer to 100? And it sounded like they weren't completely sure at that point. Maybe something else was going on behind the scenes. So we'll see when the Yankees unveil the results of that MRI, and we'll go from there.
And the team is not, and Garrett Cole is not uncertain with the way that they roll out. You just said he's a creature of habit. This man is a machine with the way that he regiments his work and his body. So the fact that they have an uncertain game plan with how they're going to have Garrett Cole come out, to me, speaks volumes in what is going on behind the scenes. It definitely tells me that something is there, because if there's any level of uncertainty, if there's nothing going on, then you say the thing. You just, he's going out there, and he'll ramp up till he's ready for a full outing on opening day. That's the answer. But if you don't give that answer, that means there's something else that's deterring you from giving that answer.
Can I quickly ask, Max, do you remember after that first start was March 1st? The plan was not to have him throw a sim game in his next game. The plan at that point was probably to have him make his next start, right? And then at some point in that time period, they decided to do a sim game. Am I correct in that?
That sounds right. March 1st was my first day down
right
in Tampa, so it's all a blur at this point. but that sounds right. And then
Do you know? Has anyone asked them like what changed in those days to make you decide a sim game? Because it's not like unheard of that they just decided to do a
right.
sim game. But at the same time, I'm curious if that question was asked to them, like, why did you do a sim game and not have him just make a regular spring start? I don't know if
I
that was ever asked.
I do think that was asked at some point when it was revealed that he was going to throw back at GMS, and I don't think the answer was, it didn't resonate enough
Yeah, they
with me
probably
to have it
threw
be
it
something to
off.
bring
Yeah.
up. But I will say that, like you said, this isn't a complete oddity, right? I mean, like Jonathan Loizaga hasn't pitched in a Grapefruit League game yet, and he's been. I watched him the other day throw 2 ups on field 2 in Tampa, and he looked great. And he was facing, a lot of the guys competing for bench spots, but he was popping the glove and seemed like Loizaga, right? And they haven't let him go into a game because it's an easier way to have a controlled environment for someone who has had injuries in the past. But nobody else in the rotation has done that. I guess Rodon did at one point. So sometimes it also comes down to just the fact that
Schedule.
there's one game on certain days. There's not always a
Right.
split squad. And so if Cole, Rodon, and Stroman are kind of lined up on the same 5-day routine, there may just be a circumstance where one of them can't go into the game. And maybe that was the justification at the time. I don't recall exactly, but it was still like, we were all asking each other in the press box, I wonder why he's not going out there. And then there were questions leading up to yesterday about when Cole was going to pitch on Tuesday, if it was going to be here in Dunedin or if it was going to be back at Steinbrenner. And finally, yesterday it was revealed that he wasn't going to throw at all.
When stuff like this happens with Cole and Judge, I'm curious like what the vibe is among the media. Is it because like it had been a pretty tame spring training, I guess.
It
We're
had
just
been
like,
completely tame. We just talked about this. The story was there was no story, and now there's.
and then all of a sudden these two things happen, just like bat signals go off and everyone's just like furiously like tweeting and getting stories together because like this is in a matter of 24 hours, the team's 2 biggest players, I mean, lump in Juan Soto in there too, but the team's 2 biggest players are potentially injured. Like that is pretty wild.
The interesting part of it was that, one, not everyone on the beat is down here or was down here at that moment yesterday morning. I was standing with Dan Martin of the Post, Jack Curry, and Brian Hoke on field 2. We were waiting for Judge to come out for batting practice because that's where he was scheduled. And that's when Boone was speaking in Clearwater. And there were 4 or 5 reporters that had made the trip for the other half of the split squad. And so my coworker, Randy Miller, is texting me during that scrum, like starting to feed me information so I'm aware of what's going on. The same thing for Hoke. He had a teammate from MLB in Clearwater. So it would be different, I think, if we were all at Yankee Stadium and the news was revealed by, Boone, say, pregame, and everyone was in one place. And then it would be a fury of tweets. We would all scramble back up to the press box. But in this case, you have to try to be as flexible as you can. And they opened the clubhouse in Tampa, and that's where we all went. And, Randy wrote a story immediately from Clearwater based on what Boone had said. And then I went in to try to get the reaction in terms of Cole from some of the pitchers that were, there for the home half of the split squad. So it can be very hectic during spring training, especially when there are multiple games going on. But even on just the home days or the workout days, we have to take screenshots of the schedules that they post for the players in there because there are so many things going on at once. And, you want to watch Kevin Smith take ground balls on the infield backfield because you're seeing how he's doing. And then simultaneously you've got Nick Birdie throwing a bullpen and Jahmai Jones taking batting practice on the other field. So you kind of have to just prioritize. And then when news breaks, you run back to your computer and react as quickly as you can.
Mm-hmm. All right, before we wrap up, I want to. I know you wrote something on Austin Wells, so I want to get your thoughts there because he's had a very good spring training, over 1,000 OPS so far. So, what did you write about him?
Well, we got Brad Ausmus yesterday in the post game managerial press conference because he's the acting manager since Boone went on the trip as the new bench coach. And Ausmus won 3 Gold Gloves during his career. He was a catcher for almost 20 years in the big leagues. So as much as he's not as familiar with, he went like this, trying to show us how the catching framing has evolved, since he was in the big leagues. But I think you can take his word for it as an experienced catcher at this level when he says that, he sees some real potential in Wells. And that's been one of my big takeaways this spring, really. And going back to the fall, I mean, every pitcher that you talked to who had worked with Wells was overwhelmingly impressed with him and the strides that he's been taking as a defender. And, Boone has admitted to us that, he was pleasantly surprised at the way that Wells was able to handle himself back there and call games and limit the run game when all of those things were kind of the stereotypical, weakness for him as a prospect. And, seeing him now have 2 doubles and 2 home runs in his last 3 spring training games, again, results aren't the be all end all at this point, but you're seeing the strength of his prospect profile, which is his bat, and the fact that he's a left-handed hitter. So you mix all of that together, and I think at this point that there is no competition there. I think he will be on the opening day roster. I'd be surprised if he isn't. And then that brings us to, I think, something that we've discussed already is what do they do with Ben Rortvedt? And, you ask other folks in that catching room, like Jose Trevino, who's now healthy, and he hit a homer in his first game back. That room is such a strength for this team. And you could go all the way down to the depths of the farm system, but right now, Boone said that he has 5 guys that he would trust in a big league game behind the plate. And that's Trevino, Wells, Rortvedt, Luis Torrens, who's a non-roster guy, and then Carlos Narvaez, who I've heard within the organization is a tremendous defender and pitch framer and receiver behind the plate. So that's not even talking about Augustin Ramirez, who's a top prospect for them, and Ben Rice, who is also a top prospect. And those guys are knocking on the door. So that position group is just a huge strength for them. Maybe that makes it easier for them to dangle someone like a Rortvedt or, not carry Torrens if there's no spot for him after he made a good impression at camp. But yeah, long story short, I'd be very surprised if it's not Trevino and Wells on the opening day roster. And I think Wells is living up to the potential as a first round pick and a guy that's, gone through the system really quickly over these last couple of years. And I don't think he'll ever look back as long as he can stay healthy and continue to take strides defensively.
With his pedigree and the fact that, he was first round guy, all of the hype around the bat. And I wasn't really concerned even about with him with the bat. He just, it seemed like he just needed to get into it and go because he's got great mechanics. He looks really good up at the plate. It was just a matter of time. But the fact that he's, getting all of these glowing reviews, and you're right, even going back to last year, they were talking about how people were impressed and not with the word surprise, but it was one of those pleasant things that they were not expecting maybe about how where his defensive game was at this point. So, I mean, the way that if you look at him on the roster, he's not going to be there to be the backup catcher either, right? Like maybe there's more of an even split, but the tendency is going to go to him. It's you don't want him sitting. Trevino can do that. He can sit and then he can play when his name is called. A guy like Wells, who does have that bat, you want consistency. I would expect him to get more of that playing time. And
you're talking 60-40, not 80-20, because I don't know either of those. Like mostly in baseball, and especially with the Yankees, has been more of like a hybrid catcher role. And like, unless you're some superstar all-star, you're not the 4 out of 5 days like Jorge Posada was 20 years ago.
Right. I mean, there was a moment where we were, peppering Boone with questions about Wells a couple of days ago. And he alluded to the fact that, if he's going to make the team, he's not going to be, a reserve. He's going to have a pretty significant dose of playing time, possibly like 3+ times a week, 4 times a week. And how is he going to work with, let's say Cole is completely healthy in himself? Who is Cole going to want to pitch to? Probably Trevino. But then again, if there's a powerhouse right-handed pitcher that they're facing, maybe you want Wells in the lineup for that. And there really isn't an avenue for him to play DH. I don't think he's a first baseman. Like, I think catching is the way he's going to get in the lineup. And that's where they want him to continue to grow, because eventually he's going to be the starter back there full time. I think that's what the Yankees want, right? That's the best case scenario, that he is the guy for the foreseeable future.
If he comes out hot with the bat, it's going to be very difficult to take him out of the lineup on a consistent basis. They're going to, if his bat is going and he is this, much improved defender that they're speaking of, I think it's going to be difficult to take him out on a consistent level, even split time. I think he's going to get the nod more often than we think.
Yeah, and the only other thing I can add there is I go on a lot of trips to Somerset and some of the minor league affiliates during the year, and I talked to Wells. This was long before he made his debut, and at that point the narrative was, are you going to be able to stick at catcher when everyone is saying that you can't do it? And any question that I asked him at that point, and he wasn't even, again, making his debut just yet. He just loves catching, and he wants to get beat up behind the plate and take the foul balls and do the extra drills. And then when he makes his debut, and Michael King, who's a savant of pitching and wants someone back there that he can trust, is just, again, dropping this high praise of someone who hadn't proven yet that he was a good catcher back there. And there are a lot of different pitchers that have been working with him this spring, and no one is complaining about it. Obviously they wouldn't necessarily do that publicly, but this is an upgrade at that position compared to what it's been over the last several years. And that's no knock on Kyle Higashioka, who was great in his role. But if Trevino is able to be healthy and go back to maybe not necessarily the all-star platinum glove Trevino, but if he's better, because last year was not what he wanted, and he was hurt basically the whole season until he got shut down. If you have him and you have the upside of Wells, who, he could hit 20, 30 home runs with his swing at Yankee Stadium if all goes well. Wells, right? So we'll see.
Well, it's definitely like you said, it's definitely a position of strength and the depth in the organization. I think it's something that they've always had, like especially under Brian Cashman the last 10, 15 years. It feels like the depth at catcher has always been a strength of his in the draft and in the development in this system.
They've drafted a lot of catchers.
They have drafted a lot of catchers. Yeah. All right, Max. Well, that is going to wrap it up for us today. I know you've probably got a busy day of reporting and covering the game. So enjoy the rest of the day in Dunedin, and we will talk to you next week.
Sounds like a plan, guys. Thanks as always. See you soon.